All right, so Instagram stories can be truly intimidating, especially when it's a new thing to you and a new part of your business. You might be worried what people are thinking, wondering if you're doing it right, and all of that kind of stuff. And showing up well on Instagram stories is an incredibly important part of your business. Instagram stories is huge right now. So whether you use stories right now and you want some tips to get better at it, or if you're brand new to Instagram, it doesn't matter. This episode's going to help you get clarity on how to show up for your audience better on Instagram. And I'm covering all sorts of things really here. It's kind of a hodgepodge episode, but we're talking about things like how many stories you should be posting at once, how to do face to camera well on your Instagram stories, and how to have confidence as you do it, how to keep people engaged and watching, all of that kind of stuff, and so much more. So if you are ready to talk Instagram stories, let's dive in. Hey guys, it's Elizabeth McCravey, and you're listening to the Breakthrough Brand Podcast. Each week, I'll bring you workshop-style trainings that teach you how to stand out online, design success from the inside out, and create a breakthrough business. It's time to turn viewers into raving fans and design the business and life of your dreams. I'm so excited you're here. All right, you guys, are you ready to talk all about Instagram stories? I'm so excited for this episode. Fun thing, one of the top 3 most downloaded episodes of this podcast was actually the first time, really, I guess the last time since this episode, but the first time I did an episode that was like specifically on Instagram in general. It's episode 14 of the podcast, and you guys really love that episode. It's been very downloaded, and that one was about how to get customers from Instagram when you have less than 1,000 followers, and that one's focusing more heavily on post. So I was like, now's the time to do an about stories. So after you listen to this one, if you're wanting even more on Instagram and you haven't heard that one, go back and listen to it. It's episode 14, and that one's all about getting customers on Instagram when you don't have a lot of followers yet. So it's really good stuff. And briefly, to start us out, I want to tell you guys what I'm doing right now. So as this episode airs, I am actually in Phoenix, Arizona, or outside of Phoenix, I believe, at the Show It United conference, which it'll be my first time attending. I'm super stoked about it. Obviously not there right now at the time of this recording, because you got to record in advance so I can do the conference thing. But I'm really excited about it, and I'll be there as a website coach. So like meeting with people one-on-one to kind of help them like look through their website and do edits to it, and all of that kind of stuff. And I'm really excited about it. And then I'll also be going to like the main stage talks and all of that kind of thing, and the big gala they do at the end. So yeah, I'm really, really excited. I've been anticipating this for a while because I'd never been to that conference. And then the next week I have 2 more conferences that are both here in Nashville. So I'm going to be conferenced out in November. I have 4 total either speaking or conference events, and yeah, a lot of stuff, but I'm really excited about that. And so because I'm at Show It, I'm recording this during my birthday week, and kind of trying to batch some episodes for you guys so you still get content when I'm out doing all the random things. So anyway, that's what's going on. If you are at the United Conference, I would love to meet you if we haven't already at the time of this recording. All right. So anyway, you guys, let's dive into the Instagram stuff. So to start us out, I want to briefly share some stats with you that will help establish why Instagram stories are so important. And I know some of you guys don't need convincing of this because you love Instagram stories, and that might even be your main means of like content consumption on Instagram, like these stats are going to show. So 2 interesting stats. I'll link to the references for these in the show notes. So first, 46% of all content on Instagram is coming from stories, and that falls only slightly behind 54% is organic posts. So get that. It's almost half of the content people are creating on Instagram is Instagram stories, almost half. And that's huge because when stories started, it seemed kind of like it was more of like just a little add-on thing on top of post. But it's like, caught up really quickly to be almost equal to sharing as posts, and I think it could easily surpass it. So that's the first interesting one. Second interesting thing, 80% of all daily active Instagram users are watching stories, and that's just as often as they're checking their feeds. So 80% of users are watching stories. So you guys, you need to be connecting with your audience on stories. When your little profile picture isn't popping up on their feed in stories and you're only in their made post feed, you're missing an opportunity to connect with a lot of people that might not be looking at regular posts as much, or at least getting another alternative way to connect with them, which is what we're going to talk about, is how to do this alternative way well. So with those stats in mind, though, are you creating story content for your brand? Are you putting emphasis on it? And if not, you could be missing out on an area where people really want to consume content from you, and specifically the right kind of content. And we can also, I always say this, I feel like when people are like, well, is this thing a good idea? Is that thing a good idea? Look at your own habits and the way you do things to see this. Like, I know for me, when I open the Instagram app, I click over to stories. Like, I'll see someone's face on my feed of like showing me their newest stories, which, to be like, one thing to point out here, the algorithm that so many people hate, do not be a victim to the algorithm, by the way. That does not serve you. But based on the algorithm, the people I am personally interacting with the most, and the people I'm watching their stories the most, responding to polls, DMing with, liking their stuff, I'm going to see their stuff first every time they post a story. So when you're actively doing stories and posts and asking people to engage with you, you're going to get pushed up to be seen quicker every time you post something by those people who are engaging and watching and that sort of thing. And when I do open my feed and I see like, these are the people whose posts come first, and these are the people whose stories come first. When I look at it, it's like, yeah, like those are the people I actually am engaging with the most. As a quick example, my sister, Suzanne, she just uses her Instagram for personal purposes, but doesn't post that often at all, like on stories or posts, because again, it's not a business profile. So she's just posting wherever she has something to share. But seriously, every time she ever does post, like twice a month or whatever, she's always the first person for me. And it's because Instagram knows, they probably don't know I'm her sister. Well, actually, they might know from Facebook. Actually, I take that back, because Instagram and Facebook are together, and I think we're marked as siblings. But they know that I'm engaging with her stuff, so she's showing up quick for me. So just know that, like, you've got to be showing up there and also asking people to interact with you, getting people consuming your content in order to be seen most frequently in regards to the algorithm. So that was a little side tangent, but the point is that both Instagram stories and post both matter a lot, which sometimes feels like, oh, that sucks, it's so much more to do. And I do think you can choose to have a bigger emphasis on one than the other if you would like to in your business. But I personally would say, like, you want to have a pretty strong emphasis on both. And one trend I've seen some people recommending is actually to kind of ditch Instagram posts, because stories are like the quote unquote place to be. And I completely disagree with that advice, because really looking at like the fact that people are consuming, or people are posting less and posting Instagram stories more. So regular posts less, Instagram stories more sometimes, or they're getting more even at least. That provides a bigger opportunity for you to be doing a good job on posts, because there are maybe less people posting than there used to be. So less competition in the feed. So don't ditch the feed for stories. You want to do both. So now though, like I said in the intro, this is kind of a hodgepodge of things, but I want to go through some advice for doing well on Instagram stories, but also to start with the question of, do I have to show my face on Instagram stories? And when I say show my face on Instagram stories, I'm talking specifically about the way that you'll see people holding out their phone and they are talking into the camera. They've got their iPhone set to be switched around to where it's the front-facing camera, and they are talking about something. And I've had people ask me this in my DMs on Instagram of like, do you think I need to do this for my business? Like, is that really necessary? Or maybe you're nervous about doing it. Maybe you don't know how to do it, so you're just playing it safe and posting little inspirational quotes and things like that. So my answer though, of like, do you need to show your face in Instagram stories is like, yes, 100% you do. And I'm going to get into like some alternative types of business, but for most of you listening, you personally as the like company owner needs to be showing up on Instagram stories for most of you listening. So I know that though is the hardest part for some people. You feel nervous showing up there. You're wondering what everyone will think of you. Maybe you're worried you'll make a bad impression. And interestingly enough, you're likely thinking about the people you know in real life and thinking they might make fun of you for going on there and like showing the behind the scenes of your workday or talking about some tip you learned recently or whatever it is. You're often, in most cases, like at least in my personal experience, and in my friends and like people who I've chatted with on Instagram about this, it's often the people you know in real life who are causing you not to show up well, or the people you knew 5 years ago when you were in college or whatever it is. And my advice would be, you've got to let this go. Interrupting this episode with a suggestion for the small business owners listening. Ever wonder what you should do for healthcare when you and your spouse are both self-employed, so there's no work-provided health insurance to participate in? Well, when my husband Adam joined me in the entrepreneurial job space over 4 years ago, we joined Christian Healthcare Ministries instead of getting traditional health insurance. And it was the best decision for us, especially in these years of growing and raising a family while also running multiple businesses. CHM is a health cost-sharing ministry and is a faith-based alternative to health insurance. We did tons of research before choosing CHM, and if you know me and Adam, you know we are all about doing the math when making big or small financial decisions. And even though it's not insurance, CHM shares 100% of eligible medical bills, which is more than the typical 70 or 80% of medical bills paid for by insurance companies. All sharing is determined by the CHM guidelines, which you can check out before and after joining. And for the mamas and mamas to be listening, you truly cannot find a better healthcare option for maternity care. I had a vaginal delivery and a C-section and birth center care and hospital care between my 2 pregnancies and births, and it was all 100% shared for. And outside of birth, we've had our share of emergency room visits and procedures as a family, and those costs were all shared by members at Christian Healthcare Ministries, leaving us only paying our monthly contribution. CHM is less expensive month to month than insurance, and because there's no network, you can choose your care with whichever providers best fit your family. I seriously just cannot recommend Christian Healthcare Ministries enough. You've got to check them out. Go to elizabethmccravy.com/CHM for more information. Also putting that link in the show notes, elizabethmccravy.com/CHM. Now back to the episode. You're never going to feel confident on Instagram stories until you just start trying and start showing up. And people who are not doing bold things in their own life are always going to come on and judge people who are doing bold things. So maybe try not to take that as a hit of like worrying people are going to judge you for like being bold, trying something new, trying to start a business, going after a dream, all of that kind of stuff. Just try not to worry about it. And the reason I know this happens is one, because I was fearful of this personally when I like started my business Instagram account and knew I had a lot of people from college or friends in real life on there, like knowing like, oh, Elizabeth's trying to start some website design thing. Or actually at that point, I was trying to start social media management more than website design, which you can hear about that in some past episodes when I share my story about my business and how it started. But like, I remember feeling like, oh, I don't want them to like judge me or think I'm a loser or whatever kind of stuff. And I think the reason I felt that way is because like I've always heard in passing conversations with people from maybe high school or college or someone I just met or whatever, judging people a little bit who are trying to start their own business or they're trying to be a blogger or whatever it is. And I've had people say to me like, oh yeah, you know, this girl we know from high school or whatever. Did you see her Instagram story the other day? Did you see that she's trying to start a blog? Did you see that like she's trying to be a wedding photographer or whatever it is? And those kinds of questions. And it really is people like, honestly, just kind of judging in not a good way. And I always, when people say that to me about someone else, regardless of if I've seen what it is they're sharing, I always try to like put them in perspective about what they just said of like, hey, they're starting somewhere. They're starting a business, which is incredible. And maybe like don't judge them. Like I've done that to people of like saying that of like, hey, like let's watch what we're saying there. And I think I also try to be careful not to do that to other people and say things like that, because the truth is though that people might talk about you and you've got to do it anyway. So I say all that to say like that might totally be happening. Like if you're thinking like, what if these people are judging what I'm posting on Instagram? Like, yes, they absolutely might be, and you've got to do it anyway. And the question would be, what do you want more? Do you want a successful business or to hide from that mean girl you didn't even really like from college? Like seriously, which one do you want more? And I hope the answer is that you want to have a successful business. And a huge part of that is going to be you being able to boldly show up as the face of your company on Instagram stories. So first thing here that we're talking about, I want to encourage you and challenge you to stop worrying what other people are thinking who are never even going to be your client in the first place. Like often, again, the people you're likely worried about are people who are never going to be paying you to do any kind of work for them. And so show up for the people who are watching and who do want to see what you're doing and who do want to know your brand. And if you hear me saying that and you're thinking like, no, Elizabeth, I still can't do it. I don't want so-and-so to watch my stories. Then another alternative thing for you, and a fun fact, you can actually set your Instagram stories to automatically be hidden from certain people. So if that's like what you need to do in order to like get started on Instagram stories, on showing your face, of sharing the behind the scenes of your business, then like hide it from those people you're thinking of. If it feels like you can't like unfriend them or let them unfollow you or whatever, just hide your Instagram stories from them and you'll be good to go. And again, I speak from experience on this, because when I did start my business Instagram, my business was fairly new at that point, but like me posting about my business was super new because I didn't really do that much on my personal account. And then all of a sudden the people who were following me on my personal account were over on my business account, and I hid behind my company name. I didn't show my face, and on Instagram stories, I stuck to sharing those cute little quotes and like pictures of my design work and just not posting that often. And it took me a bit of time to start consistently showing up on stories. But when I did start doing it, I realized I was connecting with people who actually wanted to pay me to work with them in a whole new and amazing way. And I stopped caring about what people I knew in real life thought about it. An interesting thing, like now I don't think anyone cares about what I'm posting on Instagram stories. Like I'm sure there's still some, again, mean girl from college kind of situation happening. Who knows? But I don't think anyone really cares. And likely too, another thing to point out here, I could talk about this whole episode. I'll try to stop soon. But like the people you think are like caring so much, like they might judge, but that's just a passing thought. Like no one really cares that much what you're doing. So don't let that stop you. Okay, now I want to talk briefly about situations where you feel like you aren't the person that should be showing up on your business's Instagram stories. So like, let's say maybe you aren't the face of your company. Maybe you're 100% product based. And so you think there's no reason for anyone to see you personally on there. And I get that. And I have answers for it that we're going to talk about briefly. But first thing I want to point out is that most of you listening right now are service-based businesses, or maybe you're like a course creator, a blogger, a coach, or something of that nature. And for you, you should actually be building a personal brand, which means you are the face of your company. Like if you're creating online courses, even though that's not necessarily service-based, that's more digital product-based, you're still the person on the courses. You're still the person on the webinar and the person that should be like the face of the company. So when you think about where it is you want your business to go, I want you to think about, like, does that involve me being the front facing person or not? And just know though that, like, again, I know who most of my audience is. Hello to all of you wonderful people who listen regularly, but I know most of you are women who own service-based businesses or businesses where you are the personal brand. And so people want to know who you are, what you sound like, what you act like, what your interests are, all of that kind of stuff. And you guys, I said this before, you've probably heard it before, but this relates so heavily to Instagram stories, just like it does other things. But people work with people that they know, like, and trust. And they can't know you if you don't show up for them. They can't even like you if they don't know you. And then in that case, there's truly an element of missing trust in that situation. And you guys, when you're a service business and you don't ever show yourself online, you really do have a missing trust element with your ideal client, because they would be like for example, with me, like as a website designer, people are paying me to work one-on-one with them. If they are local, we will meet in person. If they're not local, we'll do Zoom calls. Like, I'm intimately getting involved in their business, and they need to know who I am. And as a service provider, when you have that missing, it can literally feel like a Catfish moment of like, you guys know the show Catfish. I really like that show. I haven't watched it in a while, but I actually loved the movie originally when it came out before it was a show. I watched all of that stuff with it and was very excited. But anyway, think about like, is the Catfish moment, like, you know, you're saying you're some girl in Nashville, but like, are you actually an old man in Pittsburgh, like ripping people off, you know, like, not to hate on Pittsburgh, but that's just what came to my mind. But like, it's like, if I'm saying like all this stuff about who I am, but like no one can see me, hear me, connect with me, then it's like, who even is this person behind all the stock images on their feed? You know what I'm saying? So like, you've got to show your face and show who you are. And when you're not showing who you are, there really is an actual lack of trust. So just know that, like, right now, if that's how you're choosing to run your social media, just know people want to see your face. And this goes from your stories and on your feed. You need to be on it. Like, there needs to be images with you on it. And it will, in most cases, I think, lead to more engagement. I know it does for me. Like, photos on my feed that are of me get higher engagement rates than like, let's say, a little image of like some project I did. Same for Instagram stories. People watch when I'm talking to the camera, which we're going to get to some tips for that in a minute, but people engage when you're sharing yourself. So you guys who are service-based and people building personal brands, no excuse for you. You've got to show your face on here. But to answer the question, what if you're a product business where you as a person are irrelevant to the offer? Like, it doesn't matter who created it. It's all about whatever the product is. And I'm going to generalize here in my answer for what I think you should do, because I can't speak to every like super specific business, but I'm thinking specifically about those of you listening who might have product-based businesses. I literally know who some of you are. So I'm thinking about you as I answer this. But I want to use two examples of companies who are in this situation who I think do a really good job. So first one is Cultivate What Matters. I talked about them recently on the podcast, and they create amazing products. And technically for them, Laura Casey is the face of the company. She's the founder. And at one point, the company was even named Laura Casey Shop. Now it's named Cultivate What Matters. But she was the founder and it still represents as the face of the company. But she also has a large team working with her, and she's definitely not the one managing the Instagram account for Cultivate What Matters. And she has a personal brand Instagram account where she shares like, you know, the personal lifestyle stuff for herself. But then on the main feed, it's very interesting because her whole team shows up on Instagram stories and does the whole face to camera thing we're talking about here. And they all do an amazing job. So like on any given day, when you go to the Instagram stories, you will see a different woman who like isn't the quote unquote social media manager for the company. And she's talking to you about whatever it is she's supposed to be talking about, whatever she wants to talk about. I don't really know what their systems are like on the back end for this, but they do such a good job. And they even have a team member each week lead a Instagram live. They do a weekly Instagram live on Tuesdays, and someone on the team leads it every week. And so my point with them is like, it doesn't have to be you all the time showing up on Instagram stories. When you have a team and you're a product company and like your face and the product don't necessarily have to be together. But I still would say it's going to be so helpful to you when you have faces and names associated with your company. And when you have people showing up on stories, showing behind the scenes of what's going on, talking about the product versus just sharing little images with text on them, telling people what you're selling. Like, it is so much more effective for you to have a gal on your team come on there and like flip through the product and show examples and show it in use and talk about the features and all of that kind of stuff versus like you sharing static images about it. Okay. So like, that's really what I'm saying here is it doesn't have to be you, but it does need to be someone. And I would recommend it being someone on your team. So another example though of a company that's a lot larger and also does this really well is SoulCycle. Like thinking about SoulCycle, like, do you have any idea who the founders are? You probably don't. I don't even know their names. I heard them on a podcast, How I Built This, actually, talking about their company. And it's so interesting because they made a conscious decision early on to not be the front-facing people of the company. And it's founded by, if I'm remembering correctly, 2 women, but you don't ever like see them as like the face of the company, but they still do have a face of the company, faces of the company rather. And it's their instructors, their SoulCycle instructors. And they basically made their instructors into like celebrities in a sense, instead of themselves being the ones talking about the product, talking about what they're offering. It's the instructors, but they still have faces associated with the brand, and people who are really into SoulCycle like are going to know who those faces are and that kind of thing. So it's really, really cool the way they did that. And I say all that to say you got to show up on stories, and for most of you, the person on there should be you. But for some of you, it can be other people on your team. And I actually, though, another side note here, I think in most cases, you should not be hiring an outside company to manage your Instagram stories. You can do it for your Instagram post. That's like, I don't really know what your business is, so like do whatever you think works. But for your Instagram stories, I think it needs to be someone internally who can be the face of your company on stories. It doesn't even have to be the face of your company like overall. It can be on stories. Like when, again, using Cultivate What Matters as an example, like we know Laura Casey is the face of the company, but there are a lot of other women who show up beautifully on stories, and like they don't have to be the face of the company like overall, but can be the face of it on Instagram. And that works awesome. And like, so when you hire some outside company, like they're not going to do that. And you might be like missing out on this part of Instagram stories. So I would say play around with the app, learn it, and like find a way to be the person that does that, or to have someone on your team who does that. And again, for most of you listening, for me as the person talking, we need to be the person on there that is doing the face to camera stuff and the one that's mostly doing the sharing. And that doesn't mean you can't have someone on your team who's helping with other stuff. I have a lot of friends who have people who help them write the post, or maybe who share like the static images promoting something they're launching, like that kind of thing. But you need to be the one primarily doing the stuff. Okay, so now let's get into some tips to make your best Instagram stories ever and to show up confidently on Instagram. So I have, how many tips do I have? I have about four tips and then some closing thoughts. Okay, so really love these tips. So let's get into it. So first tip, you need to do a mix of different types of stories. So what I mean by this is you need to do boomerangs, videos of you talking, videos of you filming something else where it's not your face in the camera, but it's still a video, still images, words you typed onto the screen, all of it. I don't even think I'm naming all the options, but you need to have a variety of stuff happening on any given day. I would even say, like, especially if you're posting a lot that day. If you're only posting like 3 stories, they could all be of you talking. But if you're posting like, let's say 20 stories got put up on your page that day, they do not need to be 20 stories of you talking to the camera. They also don't need to be 20 stories of still images. Like, it just needs to be a variety. And a huge thing to point out here is 1,000,000 stories of you talking to the camera with no interruptions is not fun to watch. So you want to try to limit it and to kind of switch things up to where it's, maybe let's say 6 stories of you talking to the camera, and then some other stuff, and then 2 stories of you on the camera, like that kind of thing. Really just 1,000,000 stories of anything in a row is going to like kind of lose people's attention and they might click away. So you really want to mix it up and keep people engaged with what you're sharing. So that's the first tip. Do a mix of different kind of stuff on any given day. Also, while I'm on here, I didn't have this in my notes, but I do want to say this. I get asked sometimes how often you should be posting to stories. And I think it's like totally up to you. But I usually, like, my rule of thumb for my business is 5 days a week, I want to have stuff going on stories. Usually on the weekends, I don't post, or if I do post, it's going to be personal stuff. Like currently this weekend, I'm recording this on a Monday, and on Saturday, I went to a pumpkin patch with some friends, and I posted some mix, actually, a video video images and boomerang, like kind of on my stories to share about that. And you have to remember too, stories last for 24 hours. So if like every 24 hours you're kind of adding something new, you'll always have a steady flow of something for people to see. So I would say try to do like maybe 5 days a week as your goal, 3 days if you're just starting out on Instagram stories. But like having something consistently on there, I think is a good move. And for me, it's usually like around 5 days. Some weeks it's more though, depending on what I'm feeling. When you're listening to this, it'll probably be more because I'll be at a conference where I'm sharing all kinds of stuff with you guys about what I'm learning and what I'm doing. So be sure to look for that as you're listening to this. I'll be sharing behind the scenes at United, but in general, like maybe 5 days a week. Okay, tip number 2. Just say what you're going to say without all the fluff and without all the lead up. So let me explain what I mean by this. First of all, let me also say I've been guilty of this and you've probably been guilty of this. But like, here's the example. So picture me on my Instagram stories talking face to camera, and this is what I say. Hey guys, happy Tuesday. So, I haven't been on here in a week or so, but I really wanted to pop on here because I have some stuff to tell you guys that's happening this week in the business. So today on my podcast, the Breakthrough Brand Podcast, there's a new episode, and it's all about Instagram stories and how to do a good job on Instagram stories. Okay. So I've already lost them, like probably in those first like couple sentences of happy Tuesday, hey guys, all of that. I've lost them. So most of the time, in most cases, again, there are times sometimes for the fluff, but most of the time you want to skip the fluff and get to the point. This is similar to what I would say about your website copy, like the words in your website. I always say you want to get to the point. Don't make people have to read stuff that doesn't like serve the point you're trying to make. I'd say the same thing is true in most cases on Instagram stories. You want to say the least amount of stuff to get the point across. And when you think about Instagram stories, you're recording them in 15-second clips. So like what I just said, I think would have been around 15 seconds. And I would have lost people. I haven't even said anything yet. It took me until the very end of that to say what I'm actually trying to tell, which is that there's a new podcast episode about Instagram. So you want to get across what you're saying well so that people actually watch what it is you're saying and stay engaged through that whole 15-second clip. If you're just like, yada, 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 blah, 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 people aren't going to keep listening. So instead of that example I just gave, what if instead this is what I said? Hey guys, today there's a new podcast episode that you have got to hear. I'm teaching you how to literally do what I'm doing right now. It's all about how to show up well on Instagram stories. And here are some things I want you to know that you're going to learn. So that's a much better version than all the like happy Tuesday fluff stuff. And in addition to that, another quick thing to note, when you haven't been on Instagram stories lately, you do not need to announce it unless it's actually relevant to what you're about to say next. Like if you're about to say, I haven't been on Instagram stories because I took a hiatus and here's what I learned from taking 2 weeks off of Instagram, that's a different kind of situation. You know what I mean by this, but like if just any given time, you're like, haven't been on Instagram stories in 3 days. It's like, don't say that. Like, cut the extra words out and say exactly what is relevant and what needs to be said. So that's tip number 2. Tip number 3, caption what you're sharing. So I feel really strongly about this one. It needs some explanation. But when you're talking to the camera, so again, imagining face to camera video on Instagram stories, you want to semi-caption what you're saying. And I'm going to explain why. But you don't have to route the word for word what you're saying. So when I say caption, I don't mean like literally every single thing you said is like typed on there, but write pieces of what you're saying to give people context for what you're talking about. And you guys, I promise you this, people are more likely to watch, all 6 of your video to camera, face to camera stories all the way through if there's captioning on it. Because if you're just like it's just like, 10 videos of you seeing me. I'm sitting in my office and I'm just talking and there's nothing on the screen to give you context for what it is. You might like for a second, if you actually care about what I'm saying, like kind of click through a little bit to try to figure out what I'm talking about, but you're probably not going to watch all 10 of the videos because you need a little bit of context. And when I say captioning, I'm not talking about those apps where it captions it as you speak. There's some apps you can use where like I would upload the video of me talking and then it will put it like the words coming on the screen as I say it. You don't want to do that because what I'm saying is the whole goal is for people to know the context of what you're talking about before they watch you say it. So those kind of apps are not effective for that because it's typing it as you say it. So you want what you're going to say to actually be on there. And I'm also not saying this advice because people are watching on silent. Even though I do think people watch stories on silent, it might make a decision of whether or not to turn the volume on based on if they think what you're saying is relevant to their life and to what they want to hear about. But also just because the caption's going to help people decide if they want to keep watching. And you guys, people have short attention spans, especially on stories. The whole way the swiping and the clicking works, it's really like set up well for someone to start hearing you say Happy Tuesday. Let me tell you guys something, and then just click to the next thing. Because they're like, especially if you don't need captioning on that, they're going to be like, what is this girl talking about? I don't care. Swipe next. The only time I feel like you can really get away with this is if you have a super, super engaged audience who's going to watch what you're saying, no matter what like the context is, and if they know what you're saying. Like basically if they're like diehard fans, then maybe you can get away with this. But I think in most cases, you're going to have a higher engagement rate and a higher watch through rate if you're captioning the videos to some extent. So like an example of semi-captioning it, using the example I shared earlier. Like, let's say what I said, again, as a reminder, was, hey guys, today there's a new episode of the podcast that you need to hear. I'm teaching you how to literally do what I'm doing right now. And it's all about how to show up well on Instagram stories. Here are some of the things you're going to learn. If I was saying that, I could type onto the video using the Instagram app. The text on there could say, new podcast alert. I'm teaching you how to do exactly what I'm doing right now, winky face. And then maybe do like a little GIF on there that says like new episode or something like that. So like the captioning isn't saying everything I'm saying word for word, but I'm giving context so that way when someone clicks over, they can read that sentence really quickly, quicker than 15 seconds, which is how long I'm talking for. And they can decide, do I want to keep watching? Am I interested in learning about Instagram stories? And maybe they'll watch the whole thing and hear what the things they'll learn are, or maybe they'll make a mental note of like, oh, Elizabeth's new episode, it's about Instagram stories. I would really like to listen to that. Let me go download it, or let me remember to listen to that this week, whatever it is. But like giving the context is going to keep people more engaged. And I get so frustrated for people when I see this happening though, of like you posting 15 videos of you talking to the camera and there's absolutely no words on there, no GIFs, no polls, no captioning, nothing. Like you are going to lose people. Like literally, if that's something you do, just go look at your analytics for the story you recently did that on, and you will see fast drop-off rates. Like, you can see, however 1,000 people watch this and now the next one is, let's say 800, or then you drop down to 300 people or whatever it is. You can see the drop-off rate. And I really do believe it's going to get significantly lower quicker when you're not captioning. You're always going to have drop-offs no matter what usually, but I think you'll have it more when you're not captioning. So that's tip number 3. Yes, it is more work. It's way easier to just post and not add text to it, but you're going to have a more engaged audience watching the stories if you caption what you're sharing. So tip number 4, this is actually going to be a hodgepodge of tips. I'm sharing some just quick, fast tips here for how to feel more confident when talking face to camera. So some of you might be listening thinking like, that's all well and good, but I don't like talking with my face to the camera. So here are some tips to help you do that better and how to feel more confident doing it. So the first thing, you want to hold the phone pretty far away from your face. You don't want to be like how close your hands would be if you're reading a book. That's what I'm thinking of right now. I'm doing my hands out in front of me. Y'all can't see me, but I'm kind of measuring. When you do that close, it's like so zoomed in on your face that it's like too up close and personal. So you want to hold your phone. For me, I usually do like my entire arm's length away, like as if like my arm is fully extended. That's how far away I hold my phone. And if you have a big phone like me, I have one of the Plus phones. And so it's actually pretty large. So I have to have a pop socket to like hold it well when I'm doing stories. So like that might be something you need to do if it's hard to hold it far away and like hold down the button while you're talking. Maybe consider getting a pop socket. So I say though in general, like around arm lengths away is going to typically look better and probably make you feel better. That's not like all up in your business of your face when you're holding it so close. So just hold it a little bit away. Next tip, get in good lighting. You will literally feel so much more comfortable and confident when you feel like you look good, and you're going to feel like you look better when you are in good lighting. So typically facing a window is going to be good. Having a window behind you is going to be bad, and it's going to make things look darkened. But facing a window will usually bring some good natural light to your face. Fluorescent overhead lights usually are going to create bad lighting, which isn't always bad. You don't have to have perfect lighting every time. I'm mostly thinking about like what's going to make you feel the most confident. So yeah, facing a window typically is really good. For me, in our new house, we have a ton of skylights. So we have like an excessive amount of natural lighting, which sometimes for me, because of that, I need to not be facing a window because it'll be like too bright. Like my face looks like a ghost kind of thing. So you kind of got to figure it out for your house and your room. And literally on any given day, this will change. Like as I'm recording this, it's raining outside and it's completely dark, even though it's like in the morning. And so right now, if I were to record a story, it would probably actually be pretty good lighting because it's just a like dim overcast light coming in. But then if like it was a fully sunny day in my office, I kind of have to scoot into a corner for it not to be too super bright in here. So you really want to aim for natural light. Going outside is another great place, typically to post stories, because you'll have good lighting from just like good natural lighting. At my apartment, before we moved into the house, I used to consistently, some of you might remember this, I would go on walks around my apartment complex as work breaks, and that would be my Instagram story time. And I would just hold the phone out in front of my face while I'm walking, and the lighting was always pretty good. And I would record my stories that way. And then, I would caption them, remember to caption after, and then I would post them. So yeah, get good lighting. All right, next tip, be casual. Don't be super rehearsed sounding or robotic or anything like that. And that feels like it goes without saying, but I think sometimes people are scared to be casual in Instagram stories because it can feel like, oh, but I'm supposed to be a business. I'm too casual. But for me, at least with my business, I don't like to rehearse what I'm going to say when I go into a story. I like to know what I'm going to say though. So it's different than rehearsing, but I like to have like for example, when this episode goes live, I will go on my stories and talk about how there's a new podcast. It's about Instagram stories. And I will, before I start recording, have a general idea of what I'm trying to communicate, but I'm not going to have rehearsed it. I'm not going to have written anything down or practiced or anything like that. If that feels like what you need to do in order to get comfortable, go ahead and record it. And then just be okay with deleting it. If you don't like how you sound or if you say something weird or whatever, you can delete it. But I would say just go ahead and go for recording it versus rehearsing it first. And I also think it's good to feel like you're talking to a friend, not like you're doing some kind of stiff presentation. That's not what works best on Instagram stories. So super formal stuff can work well depending on your business type for post. But I would say in general for stories, what's always going to work best is more casual. Like people are going to Instagram stories and expecting a more behind the scene look, expecting a more polished look. So don't feel like you have to be on there and being super perfect and super formal and all that kind of stuff. And on that same note, be a human, be transparent, be real. And I know this might not come off naturally at first on stories because you might be really nervous. So it doesn't feel like being transparent and real comes easy when you're feeling super nervous, but it can come with practice. And for me, this has always been the goal and definitely does come more naturally now, the more, again, with practice that I've done this. But for me and my business, especially with this podcast and with social media and all the content I create, my goal is to be like 100% real with you guys, not holding back content, not holding back thoughts, and saying whatever I can to like help you and serve you. And for me, one of the biggest compliments I get both on about like how my social media is and about how this podcast is. I hear it more with the podcast because that's where I'm like literally asking people to write reviews. But I love it when people say that it just feels real, because that's the goal, because it is real. But like to read, because as I was thinking about this, I'm like, I need an example. I'm not one of those podcasters who like reads my review of the week or anything like that. But like, here's 2 pull quotes from 2 somewhat recent reviews. So one is from EMS 1187. And they said at the end of their review, the episodes truly feel like you're having coffee with a friend who knows a ton. And then this Wildflower wrote in her review, I have benefited from Elizabeth's casual conversation style. It feels like listening to a friend as you catch up over coffee. And I'm like, that's what I want it to be like. And that's how I also feel like it is when I think about this podcast and with social media. So I think that the reason I share that is because people really do say that frequently about my podcast, also about other podcasters that try to show up more casually and less scripted. I think that's what works. And it also works on stories. It works everywhere, and it's what people want. So be a human, be transparent, be real. And if that doesn't feel natural at first, know that it can with time come natural to you. Last tip for confidence, smile when you talk. You will look happier, you will sound happier, you will feel happier. Literally, as I said that just now, I got a big smile on my face, and you might have heard even my voice inflection change after I've been recording for like 40 something minutes. But smiling when you talk helps you feel more confident. If you are like watching your stories after you record them and you feel like, oh, I look nervous, I look uncomfortable, next time you record one, instead try smiling while you talk, and you'll immediately just come off like feeling more joyful and more approachable, and really sounding in your voice too happier. So that is my last set of tips. Those are some tips for feeling confident when you go face to camera. And now I want to share, just to close this out, some thoughts on like, if you're like, that's all great, Elizabeth, but I don't know what to even share to Instagram stories. So I'm going to give you guys some ideas. These ideas are specifically good for people building personal brands, but some of them apply to everyone. But I was thinking about you guys who are more service-based businesses as I wrote these. So first idea, take people through your day behind the scenes. Like you don't even have to announce like, today, everyone, we're taking you behind the scenes. Like you don't need to do that. Just like share stuff that's like from behind the scenes of your day. You can announce it if you want to, but I don't think you have to do that. And the thing that's so powerful about this is that it helps people know you on a more personal level. And I think, at least for me, like I'm a super curious person and can be kind of nosy, honestly, at times, but I love to know like what is actually going on behind the scenes of people's businesses and people's lives. So whenever I see people on Instagram stories like sharing like what they actually have going on in their day, I'm like, this is so interesting. And again, you guys, the know, like, trust factor really pulls that in. So that's one thing you can do. Another thing, share a tip that is going to be helpful to your ideal client. And I do this pretty frequently now, but really when I first got started on Instagram stories, that's what I was doing. Stuff like that could have been like a small tip in a podcast episode now, I was sharing on Instagram stories, face to camera, sharing the tip. And you guys, it can be a tip you're learning from like my podcast. You can even tag the podcast that you learned it from. Like say, this is something you learned on, Elizabeth McCravy's podcast or on so-and-so's podcast or in this book you're reading or this course you just took or this event you're at. Like sometimes people feel like they have to be like some giant expert to share what you're learning, but you don't. You just need to know a little bit more than whoever you're talking to be able to share a tip on something. When I say know a little bit more, I mean know a little bit more on that topic or just have some kind of value to share. But I think that's huge, is just sharing a tip that's helpful to your ideal client, whatever that means for your business, but sharing some kind of tip. Sharing details on a project you're working on, that is a really fun thing, kind of behind the scenes on that. You can share screenshots of like messages, testimonials, things like that. I personally love doing that. In regards to promoting my template shop, I will like share screenshots of emails of people who purchased who are like raving about the product, because that's a great way to promote the product and to share like, this isn't some flashy testimonial on my website. This is just like actually what someone just sent me in an email, that kind of thing. Another idea, share personal life stuff with your family, books you're reading, what you're cooking, what you're doing on your Saturday, that kind of thing. People want to connect with you on a personal level. And again, if you are someone who has a product-based business where maybe you're not like trying to do the whole face of the company thing, you can still be doing that on a personal Instagram and be building a personal brand separate from the Instagram account for your main business with the personal life stuff. So I think that's really valuable though. You want to balance it well between personal life and business stuff, but I do think personal life stuff has a place in all of this. Share someone else's posts to your stories. That's a really cool thing you can do. In a way, Instagram has really integrated the feed with stories, but you could share, like say someone shared a funny quote or an inspirational quote or like a helpful graphic, you can click that little arrow button on underneath their post, and you can actually share it to your Instagram stories and like say something about it. I really love doing this, and I do it pretty often. I'll save stuff, and then whenever I feel like sharing it, I'll share it. I also love doing this with memes. You guys, memes are like literally my favorite part of Instagram. I have an entire folder that has like over 100 memes I've saved. It's like a private folder. But I would say like they are the best memes on Instagram. Like I've curated the best possible memes, and I love to share those every now and then on my stories, and people really enjoy it because it's funny and fun. So you can share stuff like that, share inspiring quotes, helpful graphics, funny things, whatever. But sharing that kind of stuff makes for really great story content. Also sharing your stuff. Like when you do a static post to your feed, you can share that to your stories to get more reach and then create that connection where people who are just watching stories go find it in your feed. Another thing that I cannot leave out, but you want to talk about your offers, what you're selling, freebies that get people on your email list, anything it is you're promoting. Talk about that on Instagram stories. I can't emphasize enough like how important it is to not fall into the trap of just sharing fun stuff, but also actually market yourself. I think oftentimes women especially can be afraid to market too heavily, to sell too harshly and that kind of stuff. But what instead ends up happening is you're posting like all your family photos, but no one knows what you actually sell. So pretty frequently you need to be talking about what it is you sell, how people can pay you, and what it is you offer and why that matters to them. So that needs to be a huge part of your stories. Another last idea, ask questions. Share polls, the quizzes, the question box thing, all of that is available. And there's an icon when you're writing stories, but you can add like polls. There's a bunch of different kinds. There's quizzes now, and then there's the question box. All of that kind of stuff is an awesome way to engage with your audience. And something to remember with those is when people are engaging with a poll you post on your stories, they are telling Instagram that they like what you're posting, that you posted something good, something they wanted to engage with, and then your posts are going to be, or your stories are going to be shown to more people and your posts because that people are engaging with them. And also that person who engaged is likely going to see your stuff quicker in their feed because of that, because they're showing Instagram, I want to engage with what she's posting. So that's a really great use for those as well to like create engagement. And sometimes people think polls need to be like something super serious. I literally sometimes will do polls where like the two options are both like basically the same thing, but kind of just asking people to engage. Like for example, I do the Instagram stories for our Young Life Club, and I'll sometimes do a poll on club day of like, who's excited for club tonight, which is like the event Young Life does every week. So instead of them making one of the options like, I'm not excited, because no one wants me, we don't want people to click that. We don't actually want to know really if they're not excited. Instead, the options would be like 100%, and then the other option is can't wait. So it's like both of them are positive, but both like create engagement when someone clicks it for them to be more engaged with the page. So you can do that in your business, asking questions. They don't have to have some super serious tone to them, but that's a really great one for Instagram stories. So those are some ideas for what to share. If you're like, I don't know what the heck to share, but all this sounds good, there's a list to help you get started. So I really hope that this episode is helpful to you, and I hope that I can like see you posting more on Instagram stories. Another idea idea. If you need something to post, you can share this podcast episode. If you think it's something that would help your audience as something they could also go listen to. That's another, I didn't even include that, but I love sharing stuff like that too, like things that are working for me. Sharing that kind of thing. So share this episode on your feed or with someone you think it would help. So I really hope you take action on this, implement this stuff into your business. Seriously, Instagram stories can be so huge for you if you take the energy to start feeling good about it and feeling confident and do the extra work to make it higher quality. So to close this out, I have a quote from the one and only Seth Godin. I always share his quotes in here, but he's like the king of marketing, so it's super relevant. But I love this quote from him. He says, "Be genuine, be remarkable, be worth connecting with." So that's something to think about when you think about your Instagram stories. Be genuine, be remarkable, be worth connecting with. So I love that quote. I hope this episode was super helpful to you guys, and I can't wait to hear your feedback. And I will be back next week with another episode. Bye for now.